Hey on, folks. Welcome to the GM's Alcove. This time I got a battle for you, the refight of the Battle of Tifernum, or Tifernum, from SPQR, a board game by GMT Games. This will be the second scenario I've actually played since I got the reprint back in 2018, 2019. I did play the first scenario, which was an ambush on a Roman column from the Barbarian supplement. Again, Samnites and Romans. And this is the second one. I'm finally getting around to playing this battle. And once again, this is another battle from the Third Samnian War. This is the Battle of Tifernum, Campania, 297 BC, right around southwestern Italy, I believe. And we're going to see who comes out on top in this battle. It's the forces under Rullianus, Fabius Rullianus, the Roman general, going against Gellius Egnatius, the leader of the Samnite forces. Now, a little background on the battle. And again, this battle takes place in the Third Samnian War, I believe. Up until this point, the Romans have been having a hard time dealing with the Samnites. Samnites preferring to stay in the hills and ambush the Roman columns whenever they could. And I believe that's the focus of the first scenario from the Barbarian supplement. Again, it's a Roman column ambushed by Samnites in a hilly region. Well, this battle is a little exception. Rullianus trying to get to grips with Ignatius and face him in an open battle. Pretty smart and on to the Samnites. He knew about their ambushing tactics and was able to avoid much of them. However, Ignatius would not come down from the hills until he learned that there was a second Roman army on the way to join up with Rullianus. That's trouble. And Ignatius felt pretty confident that he could take out one Roman army in an open fight, but not two. So he rushed down from the hills, and he was going to meet Rullianus head-on in an open battlefield, playing into the hands, basically, of the Romans. That's just what Rullianus wanted. And in this battle, what you're going to see, there is a special rule that simulates a flanking force. Now, Rullianus, being a little tricky fellow, he managed to dispatch one of his tribunes from his force, along with some hastati, to make a little flanking maneuver. And hopefully, arriving during the fighting, this would trick Ignatius into thinking it was the arrival of the second army. And historically, that is pretty much what happened, and it caused the Samnites to kind of break and falter, run away from the battle, and that was that. However, the Romans were not in a position to follow up and finish off Ignatius's army. Thus, it's considered a draw. So historically, that's what happened. So you're going to see that play out, and I'll talk about that special rule of a flanking force that's meant to deceive the Samnites. It's pretty cool. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward fight. Romans and Samnites lined up in a relatively open landscape and moving forward and engaging. So we're going to play this out and see what happens. In terms of manpower, it's a medium-sized battle, I would think, for the era. There's about 20,000 each side. The Samnites have a slight edge, 18,000 infantry, 2,000 cavalry, going against the Romans of 16,800 infantry and 1,800 cavalry. So the Samnites do have a slight advantage in numbers. And again, it's about 20,000 each side. In terms of commanders, quality-wise, the Samnites have an edge. Romans do have more because of their tribunes, and so on and so forth. So, folks, let's jump into it. I'm going to talk about the deployment of the forces and the makeup of the forces and all that other good stuff. So let's jump into it. All right, so let's take a look at the Romans. Here they are deployed in their typical checkerboard multi-line formation. Look at the cavalry on the wings. That's the brown units. Typical Roman cavalry, nothing really special about these. Mostly effective against light infantry and skirmishers and some other cavalry. Or hitting the enemy in the flank or the rear. So that's pretty much how they're probably going to be used in this battle, if at all. Of course, this back rank here, these are the Triarii, and in front of them are the Principae, in front of them are the Hastati, and in front of them are the light infantry or velites of the army. Now, I should point out that there's two legions present in this battle. There is the blue, which is the 3rd legion, and then there is the purple, which are the 5th legion. I should point out that each legion is actually divided into 2 legions, so that you have the citizens And then you have the non-citizen legionnaires. The non-citizen legion are termed ally, and you'll hear me reference that as we play the battle. Now, the way we distinguish them within the same legion, or same color, is on the counters. You'll see right there, if that focuses, an AS slash, and then the Roman numeral 3. That is the non-citizen legion of the Third Legion. That's how you tell them apart. It's that AS symbol. Now, the normal legionnaires, the citizens, don't have that AS in front of the counter. They have just the Roman numeral, in this case 3. These are triarii, I should point out. So there is actually 2 legions within a legion, basically, and that applies for the 5th Legion as well. Now, the command, now this is particular for the Romans, and it's pointed out in the main rules how the command structure works for the Romans during this era. There's basically a division of tribunes and praefecta, and the praefecta are the commanders of the non-citizen portion of the legion. The tribunes are in command of the citizen portion of the legion. In this case, we have a tribune. He's going to be in command of any of the legion troops. And the praefecta up here, he's going to be the one in charge of any of the non-citizen, the AS legionnaires. That's important to note. This praefecta over here is unique in the sense that he can only command cavalry, so that's all he can do. So he's very limited in what he can do and what he can command in the battle. And yeah, then we have Rullianus right there. He can command anybody and everybody in the army. Now, this will be important as we play the game because especially with line commands, that's where you command an entire line to either move and or fire all the units in that line if they're adjacent, or in some case there can be spaces between those units. As long as you're not in an enemy zone of control or things like that, you can move all the units in a line, for instance these triarii, or this line of Principi can all activate, even if they're from different legions. Tribune can activate all of them and have them all move forward and possibly fire with their javelins, which they are equipped with. The pilum, of course, classified as javelin equipped in this game. They can do that, and how many times they can do that in an activation depends on their stat here, which is 1, so this tribune can only do it once. It's that third number from the left on the bottom. So that's important to note. I won't go too deep into the rules. There are some and ifs and buts to be able to use line commands, but I'm not going to go deep into that. Maybe as we play, I'll point out some things as we go. So yeah, that's what you need to know regarding the command structure of the Romans. They usually have more leaders, but what they can give orders to is dependent on their type. Tribune, praefecta, or the cavalry commander over here. Or the main general, the overall commander, the OC, he can command everybody. Now, yeah, so that's the 2 legions, the 3rd and the 5th, their division of commanders. Again, there's 6 of them, and they're ready to go. Now, taking a look at the Samnites, they are upside down. I'm playing this solo. Bear with me. You can see these orange counters. These are the generals, or the leaders, of the Samnites, and there's only 4 of them. Remember, the Romans have 6. However, that said, the Samnite generals do have better ratings, higher initiative, higher command range distances. Again, I'll explain all that as we play the game where it's appropriate to do so. But enough to be said that they are slightly better in ability, although there's only 4 of them. They're located here, 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 and here. Ignatius himself, main general, is located here. I'm sure he'll come into play. He's their best commander. In fact, he's the best commander in the battle. So he's going to be quite important. The Samnites fight very similar to the Romans. As you'll see, they also have legion equivalent type of troops. And that includes these guys here. And you'll notice they are stacked 2 units per hex, much like the Hastati and the Principe did. That's because these guys have a similar ability to do so as Roman troops. I don't believe they have the ability to use line extension, however. They're going to have to actually move out of the hex, spending movement to do so, to spread out. They don't have the line extension ability, I don't believe. I'll have to double check that, but I'm sure they don't. Otherwise, they're treated the same as Roman legionnaires in that respect. They can stack. And they also have some medium infantry and heavy infantry, mercenaries and that sort of thing, who obviously can't stack. They're not legion equivalent type troops, much like the Triarii are not legion troops. So you'll notice there's only one of them in a hex. Yeah, but they are formed up in 3 lines in this case. You've got the light infantry to the front, very similar to the Velites. Then you've got their van, which is the equivalent of like the Hastati line for the Romans. It's their first main battle line, basically. And behind that, they have their main battle line. That is like the Principe or the Triarii. We can compare them to. That's their 3rd line to fall back on. Over here, we have cavalry. This is their only cavalry, much like the Romans. It's all they got. Most of these, all of them, in fact, except one, are light cavalry armed with javelins. They're not going to be very useful unless they can get close enough to harass and shoot at the enemy. Not going to be very effective in melee, of course, even against the Roman cavalry. However, there is a heavy cavalry unit here, and it's probably the best cavalry in the game, or in this battle, but it's only 1 unit. So they could probably best the Roman cavalry face to face, but we'll see if they come into play. There's a total of 5 cavalry units here. There's 1 general on top. And yeah, that is the distribution of the troops here. So that's the Samnites. All right, now we're going to look at something fun for the scenario. It's otherwise a straightforward pitched battle, both armies marching towards each other. This is a little drama going on. And of course, Rullianus, he's detached one of his tribunes to lead a small detachment of 4 Hastati, pulled from the 3rd Legion. You can see them right there. They're blue. To make a flanking maneuver during the battle, kind of to deceive the Samnites into thinking that it's the arrival of another Roman army to link up with Rullianus. And basically, starting on turn 2, you're going to see me rolling a d10 to see if they arrive. Now, starting on turn 2, the chance of them arriving is a 6 or greater on that d10. If they fail to arrive, I roll again in the following turn, and the chance of them arriving gets 1 better, so it'll be 5 or greater on a d10. And on the next turn, if they fail to arrive, I roll again, and it'll be even 1 fewer, so it'll be a 4 or greater for their arrival. And so on until finally this little detachment arrives on the battlefield. So that all begins on turn 2. Now, the effect of these guys, because for sure they're going to arrive unless the Samnites get really lucky and destroy the Roman army early on, the effect of them is that they will be able to move on from their entry point. Let's say it's A. They'll literally move on to the board. And at the end of that arrival, the end of that turn of their arrival, every Samnite unit within 10 hexes of a unit that arrived is got to make a TQ test, and that's basically a D10 compared to their TQ value. If it exceeds it, it takes that many cohesion hits. It's basically troops breaking from formation, running for their lives in horror, the arrival of the Romans. If the unit is already routed, failure means that they actually are eliminated, so they're totally dispersed and out of the battle. So it can have a powerful impact on the Samnite morale overall, if they can move far enough on to affect a lot of units. So that's the effect of them. And I believe at the start of the following turn, I think it's the start of the following turn, what happens with the Romans is that they remove cohesion hits from their units if those units are within command range of Rullianus. the Roman general. This representing him, seeing their arrival, he begins to spur on his troops, reorganizing them, getting them inspired to fall back in line and move forward. And the Romans are just filled with inspiration at the arrival of another army. Of course, historically, this wasn't actually what happened. It was an actual detachment of troops that came onto the battlefield. It wasn't the second army arriving, but the Samnites didn't know this, so they fell into despair. And yeah, that's the situation with that. All right, so how am I going to go about this? Well, basically, at the start of the game, what I'll do is just the way you normally do it. I'll pick one of those entry point locations for the detachment to come on, like maybe B or maybe A, depending on my mood, I guess. I'll pick one. And when they do actually arrive, in other words, that die roll minimum is met when I check for it, what I'll do is I'll roll an extra D10. And maybe on the result of a 0 or a 9, it means, oh, they've come on a different location. And then I'll just roll between the remaining 2 locations, which one it comes on. I might do something like that just to throw in a little unpredictability, which I like to do in my solo games. Throw me off a little bit. Not that I'm trying to be ultra realistic or anything like that. It's just something to make it a little less predictable and make it a little more enjoyable for me. Because like I said, I'm fighting this battle solo, so you got to be a little bit creative at times with the rules and the mechanics. And yeah, I'll show you what happens when they do actually arrive and how I handle it, but that's the gist of what I'm thinking of doing. Okay, so at this point, the only thing left is just talk a little bit about strategy for both sides, what I'm going to do with each army to play this battle, and see how well I do. And I'm pretty much going to keep things simple. I'm not going to get too complex. It's not really a complex scenario. It's just basically both armies lined up ready to fight. I mean, the strategy's pretty simple for both sides. The Samnites want to get to grips with the Romans and start dealing damage to them before that detachment arrives. So they kind of pretty much want to move forward and attack. And for the Romans, it's pretty much the same thing. They want to move forward and engage the Samnites as quickly as possible, pinning them as far back to the edge as they can, because that maximizes the impact of the flanking detachment when it does arrive, which I mentioned before. So they kind of don't want to sit back either. And normally what I do when I play a board game or a miniatures game solo is I kind of analyze each side's options in terms of what strategies I think are available to them. If I was the player for that army, say in a 2-player game, what would I do? What are my options? And I'll do the same thing for the other side, again, when I'm playing solo. And when there's more than one option strategically that I can adapt for the battle, I'll roll off for it. If it's at least a 50-50 anyway. If it's less than that, I'm probably going to take the other one. Or if I want to try something totally different and new and unusual, I might go for something less likely. But in this case, I'm looking at this, and both armies are pretty much going to have an attack strategy, engage the enemy as quickly as possible. In the case of the Samnites, we want to engage them, get as far away from our deployment edge as we can, and take it to the Romans and do as much damage as we can. Likewise, for the Romans, they want to take it to the Samnites and keep them pinned back as far to their edge as possible. So we're going to adapt that for both sides. Pretty simple and straightforward. Ideal, actually, for a learning game. So that's what we're going to do. As far as the actual tactics, we'll say, for both armies, how are they going to proceed with their attacks? That's the big question. Again, I think it's pretty straightforward and simple. You're going to see both forces advancing forward. You're going to see the Velites and the light infantry, the Samnites, moving forward to engage in the center, seeking out dominance so that hopefully they can start peppering the enemy's battle line with their javelins. Cavalry, on the other hand, will probably be held back by both sides. Romans, I think, have the superior cavalry in this case, but even then it's iffy. The Samnites have light cavalry, which is ideal for harassing the enemy from a distance, which they're good at. and would like to use them that way, I think you might see 1 or 2 units of Samnite light cavalry helping out their light infantry in that role. But not to overcommit the Samnite cavalry. We still want them there, but we don't want to entice the Roman cavalry forward. Yeah, so I think the cavalry won't get engaged too early, unless it's to support the light infantry fighting. And we'll see what develops from the light infantry engaging in the middle. But I think for the most part, the Romans and the Samnites, they want to move forward as quickly as possible and engage the enemy. Maybe one army will, probably the Samnites actually. What I'm going to do is attack an echelon and withhold their right flank, which is the flank with the cavalry, because I don't want to get wiped out over there. That is their weaker flank, I would suspect. So I think they might attack or advance in echelon, leading with their left flank. So I think that's the way I'll go with them. So, yeah, so that's the general strategies that I'm going to adopt. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Next up, I don't want to get too deep into the rules, but I do want to give you some idea of how the game flows, basically its sequence of play. First of all, when we get into turn 1, how it works is we start off with what's called the leader activation phase. Literally, the lowest ranked in initiative leaders go first, and it ascends from there, so that the last ones to go in a turn are the highest initiative rated leaders. Looking at this army, the Romans have the lowest rated initiative leaders. In fact, there's 2 of them here. This Prefecta, who has an initiative of 2, and this Prefecta over here, who has an initiative of 2. They're going to be going first, and they're both the same initiative, so the Roman player will choose one to activate first. Basically, what you do is when you activate a leader, he can give either line orders, line commands as they're known, or he can give individual orders. All the commanders in this battle can only give 1 line order per activation, and that's it, so it'll be easy to remember. And what that is that this Prefecta, for instance, could give a line order to all the velites in one go. They can move and or fire. It's a very efficient way to get troops up and at them, and that's what line commands are for. Individual orders is a second option. He could do that instead. And the number he can give is 2. He can give 2 individual orders to any units he can command within his command range, which is the first number on their counter. It's a 3 in this case. So any units that he can command that are within 3 hexes of him can be given a line order, an individual order. Individual orders are things like rally, recover from cohesion hits it might have suffered, or move and or fire, or just sit and fire. It's a lot of different options a unit can do, and those are done through individual orders. An initiative of 2 is very low. If we look at Rullianus, he has an initiative of 5. Not only does he go later in the turn after the lesser commanders or lesser initiative rated leaders go, but he can give up to 5 individual orders in an activation. And like I said, all the commanders in this particular battle can only give a maximum of 1 line command in an activation. So there is that. So that's how it progresses. After the orders phase is done, you resolve any shock combat. That's where adjacent opposing units fight in melee. We'll get into that as we play. Once all those are resolved, we go into what's called the momentum phase. Now this is a fun part of the game. A leader who has just done his activations, okay, let's say he did his single line command, or he completed his 2 individual orders for the turn. After the shock combats are resolved, following all that, there's the momentum phase. And what momentum is it's a chance that he, instead of being flipped to his finished side, which means he's done for the turn, which you do on the completion of his order phase and shock resolution, he instead can attempt to go again. And he can attempt to go again up to twice per turn. So basically, a leader can go up to 3 times, giving out individual orders and moving guys and all that sort of stuff. But the only way he does this beyond the first is through what's called momentum. He makes a die roll, and if he passes his roll, he can go again. He's successful. If he fails it, he's flipped to his finished side, and that's it. Now, here's where the fun part comes in. If he is successful on a momentum roll, the opposition, the opposing army, one of his higher rated leaders can attempt to trump that successful momentum. And it's basically the same die roll he made. He makes a die roll, and if he is successful, the trumping commander, this commander, instead of using momentum, is automatically flipped to his finished side, and the trumping commander goes instead. However, here's the risk. If the trumping commander fails his die roll to trump, he's finished. So in other words, he never gets a chance to go in the turn. So it's a risky move. And upon that failure to trump, he would continue with his momentum. And that's how that works. It's a really fun part of the game. And there's some other things you can do with trumping. You could trump your own commanders to go out of sequence with initiative. All kinds of things. And it really makes this game challenging and fun and emphasizes command of the armies. It's such a vital part to success in the battlefield during this era. And I think the mechanic for trumping and use of momentum and initiative is a fantastic way to represent it. So folks, that's how we're going to start turn 1 of this battle. You're going to see me activating the lowest rated initiative leaders in the battle, which happens to be the Romans, basically the tribunes and prefecta, and then it's going to go to the Samnites, and so on and so forth, back and forth. And you're going to see them activating units, moving lines of troops forward, resolving shock combat, and so on and so forth. So that's just a quick rundown of how it works. And when I get through the first turn, I will show you the actual turn sequence and describe it, and so you can follow along and get the gist even more of how the game plays. So folks, that's the strategies, that's the basics of initiative and the turn sequence. I think it's time we jump into the battle. Hey folks, that's a look at the deployment and the strategies I'll be utilizing in the battle. One of the things I will do when we start the first turn is, as the Roman player, I'll choose one of those 3 entry points for the flanking force, which will probably be B. We shall see. I'll think about that. But after that, we're going to get into the sequence of play, and we're going to start off with the leaders with the lowest rated initiative rating. They will be the first ones to go, and it just ascends from there. So the leaders with better initiative, higher initiative, will be the last ones to go. They'll be able to react. Of course, they also have the opportunity to trump any lower initiative rated leaders who attempt to use momentum, i.e. go again. And that's going to be fun. Should be an interesting fight. Now first, let's take a look at the turn sequence. As you can see, it starts at the very top with the leader activation phase. This is where the lowest rated initiative rating leaders activate. That's followed by the orders phase. This is where movement and missile fire combat can occur as units are activated as a line command or individual orders. It all depends. And once that's all done, we go to the shock combat resolution. Basically, units that are adjacent to each other, they will fight in melee. And that'll be resolved completely. Next, we go to the momentum phase, letter C. And that's where the activated leader gets an opportunity to go again. He'll make a die roll. And trump attempts will also be attempted in that phase as well for any successful momentum. And after that, we go to D, which is route and reload phase. This is where units that are low on missiles or are marked as no missiles, and I'll get into that in a second, they can reload, as well as units are rallied that are routing, and so on and so forth. And finally, we flip finished leaders, all those leaders that have activated, back over to their normal side so they can be activated again in the next upcoming turn. Finally, we go to withdrawal phase. This is where we check to see if one side, because of casualties and losses to their units, has accumulated enough route points, to leave the battlefield. And the battle ends at that point. The opponent wins, and victory is determined. Of course, we have lots of little counters you'll see me utilizing during the gameplay. Most of these are just informational or reminder counters. Things like which units have rallied, which units are currently routed, which units are engaged in a continuous melee. Other markers to remind me to check TQ, a shock must check TQ, or a shock no TQ check prior to a melee. Which units have moved already, because leaders can be activated more than once in a turn, they can therefore move units more than once. There's counters to represent units that are low on missiles or have no missiles left. That's what those counters are for. And of course, all the numbered counters, those are cohesion hits. As units degrade in their cohesion of their unit, they accumulate these, and that's not a good thing. Units end up routing eventually. And you'll see me put these under the units as they accumulate cohesion hits. So that's the bulk of the informational markers you'll see me using in the battle. So there we go, folks. That's a look at the deployments, the counters, the armies, a little bit of the history, some of the rules as well, and strategies that I'll be utilizing in the battle. A pretty straightforward fight, except, of course, for that little flanking detachment the Romans will be utilizing. We'll see what effect that has on the battle. But stay tuned, folks. I'm going to be posting every few turns, or maybe even every turn, depends on how well it plays, for you guys to follow along my refight of Tifernum using SPQR. So like, share, comment, leave me some feedback. Do you enjoy SPQR? You want to see more videos of this series? Let me know. And as always, folks, you guys hang in there. It's only going to get better. Take care, folks.